Hey, Dave here on the DC on-screen feed. How are you? You doing okay? Did you, have that thing looked at? You should. It doesn't look normal. It's very asymmetrical. Listen, so shortly after The Flash came out in theaters, I wound up meeting a guy named Frank McGuire. He's one of the hosts of the podcast, Meanwhile, Back on the Podcast. He was looking to talk to someone who didn't like The Flash, and I answered the call. A vibe check and a couple of text conversations later, and the fix was in. I guested on the show, we talked about The Flash, we talked about a few other DCEU related things. I'll be playing that episode for you in just a minute. If you heard our review of The Flash here on DC on Screen, I think you're in for something different with this recording. We had a very good conversation. I came out of it liking the film somewhat more than I initially did, even if my qualms are still intact. By the way, don't mean to say that Jason and I didn't have a good conversation. Anyway, it's a different conversation than what Jason and I had. Frank and I don't see eye to eye on a lot of the review, and we certainly don't see eye to eye on Birds of Prey, but we kept it civil, and he seems like a guy who is open to changing his mind. He's open to seeing other people's points of view, and I consider that a balm in this age. I do want to apologize to my trans fam out there. I was absolutely disheartened upon listening back to this one because I did inadvertently misgender Ezra Miller a couple of times. It wasn't my intention. All the apologies. I'll do better. Moving on from my old brain shame, this is dropping Thursday, October 12th. Jason and I are recording a new episode on Sunday, October 15th, and it's looking like we'll actually have Frank on that episode with us. Among other things, we'll get into the recent Variety reports about Momoa and Heard and all that fun drama he oozed with sarcasm. And that's it. That's enough. I think it's enough. I hope you keep listening, because after this break, I talk with Frank McGuire on Meanwhile, Back on the Podcast, about The Flash. And go check out their show. Give it a tumble.
Coming up on this episode of Meanwhile, don't blink because you might miss it. It's our long-awaited spoiler-hot review of The Flash, one of the most controversial and divisive films Warner Brothers has ever put out. Was the CGI truly that cringeworthy? Did young Barry Allen pretend to be more annoying than a kazoo in a library? And did The Flash have as many problems as everyone is pretending it does? We're poised to unravel these mysteries and so much more on this electrifying episode of Meanwhile Back on the Podcast. Hit the music.
Gathered together from across the many corners of super fandom, here in their poorly ventilated podcast studio are the most free-thinking and entertaining collection of know-it-all nerd podcasters ever assembled. Their mission: to push the dividing darkness that threatens the magical land of super fandom back onto its heels, one episode at a time. Together, they fight for truth, objectivity, and nuance in the conversation and debate over fictional made-up shit.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Meanwhile Back on the Podcast. I am your host, Frank McGuire, and I do not have any of the other co-hosts with me today from the Meanwhile show, unfortunately. This is our, obviously you can tell by the title of the episode, this is our spoiler hot review for The Flash. And sadly, people have sort of bumped up against their schedules and work and a whole bunch of other things. And there's some people that are sort of in moral protest to going to see the movie. And I can understand where they're coming from. So I thought I'd maybe spin this on a different angle because I wanted to talk about this movie. So I took it upon myself to head over to Reddit the other day, and I put up a post in DC Cinematic. I put up a post asking for somebody to join us on this episode that didn't like The Flash, because I wanted to kind of unpack both sides of the issue, because this is a very divisive film, and I don't know necessarily if I could chalk all of it up to the personal moral sort of issues with Ezra Miller, or the whole thing about the Snyder fan base just basically vehemently boycotting this film. And I really wanted to better understand why people didn't like this film. I'm lucky enough to be joined in the pod today by Dave Robertson of the DC On Screen podcast. What's up, Dave? How you doing, man?
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
No worries, dude. Very excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for responding to my Reddit post, and I really enjoyed our conversations that we had afterwards, and we did a quick get to know you the other day. I really felt like we jived, man. We were talking about Snyder and talking about DC. We talked about a little Marvel. We sort of talked about like our styles and how we sort of come at these issues, or how we discuss these issues. And I really felt like we had a lot in common. And as my listeners know, it's very important that sort of all sides of the coin get explored. And I wanted to make sure that obviously that you sort of shared the same energy, and I think you do. And I think we're going to have a great conversation about this movie. It's not necessarily going to be the spoiler hot review as it's normally done in its own structure, because I want to start it off a little bit differently. So like I said at the top, I'm really sort of confused as to why people didn't like this movie. I am. I'm flummoxed. I'm perplexed. I can't make heads or tail of it other than the bad CGI. And I grant that it is not the greatest CGI in the world. However, I do think some stylistic choices were made on purpose, and I do want to unpack that and get into that. But Dave, why don't you sort of kind of give me your version of why you don't like the movie?
Well, so I do want to clarify. One, sure. I'm a huge Snyder fan.
You are, yes.
I am, but I'm also a huge DC fan. I was a DC fan for 30 years before Snyder even thought about doing it. So, one of the problems I'm seeing with DC in general, and it really did feel like it culminated very clearly in The Flash for me, is that there are too many cooks in the kitchen. And it was very clear to me that there were 3 administrations at work on The Flash. It started out Hamada, and then it was DeLuca and Abdi, and then Gunn. And all of them had different visions for how this movie was going to fit in with the rest of the universe and how it was going to end. And I think it's very clear, like now we're hearing Andy Muschietti come out and say, oh yeah, I have a 4.5 hour cut. There is a huge problem with Warner Brothers and their NDA system or something. Like, you don't hear this from Marvel so much, where people are like, where directors are coming out and saying, well, my vision was different. It was 4 hours. With Warner Brothers, we've got the Ultimate Edition of BVS. We've got Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Ayer cut, the Schumacher cut. Like, Jesus God. It feels like there were 4 hours of this movie that got cut. I felt like they set up something with Iris. They set up something with Patty and Albert. I felt like they didn't give us enough to showcase chemistry between Barry and his mom, or really Barry and his family dynamic, and especially Henry and Nora. Like, I wanted to see like what made their marriage work a little more, and why it was such a tragedy that what happened. There was also a bit where Barry comes in and we get the flashback and we see that there's like a ball cap on the ground. And it seemed to be a clear indication, because the camera like kind of hits that ball cap and then swoops over just enough that like it's setting up, it's a smoking gun. It's setting up, oh, this is who did it. And then they didn't do that. And we know Muschietti wanted to put Reverse Flash in there. We've seen the storyboards with Reverse Flash. It was just a lot of stuff like that. Like, it felt like there should have been more Kara Zor-El. There was a lot of like little threads that just felt like they weren't properly handled. They weren't properly fleshed out.
Okay.
And then to top it all off, we wind up, we don't know. Like, and I think that hurts the film. Like, it was fun seeing Clooney again. I loved it, but it made me feel like the movie ended on a joke rather on a definitive place. And I know this because they don't know what they're doing quite yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so, I mean, there were other little things, like young Barry was annoying. The 18-year-old, he kind of acted like Pauly Shore. And I never liked the superhero loses his powers and has to get them back trope.
Right.
And I felt like the baby scene, the opening was great until the baby scene. And even with even if you like push aside the bad VFX, I thought it took way too long to get through that. It was like torment for me. And then looking back and going, God, I really would have liked to have seen more with Iris. I would have liked to have seen more with all these other things, to make it feel more grounded, more real, make the emotional stakes a little more poignant.
Okay.
But it's just stuff like that.
Okay. Well, let's start with your zoomed out version of the setups and payoffs, because I can see where you're coming from. Clearly you've done way more research into what was supposed to, what this movie could have been than I have. I didn't know that Machete said that he's got this 4.5 hour cut. That's interesting to me. I'm always on the side of the artist, and I really don't like when studios interfere and they try and change people's work. So if there is that cut that exists out there, I'm almost sort of ready to start a petition to get it made. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, obviously the film business is a business, and there's a lot of studio interference as far as the history of WB, and they're not the greatest of, sort of letting creators do what they want to do. So, given that you have not only obviously seen this film, but then you've got this other element to sort of in your calculus of what this movie could have been, I could see how you could feel that way about what was missing from the movie, or, what was set up, or the sort of lack of setup and payoff. And it's interesting that you were looking for such a degree of setup and payoff, because one of my biggest complaints of the modern day comic book cinema landscape is that it didn't have the breadth or the latitude in character development that we've had in the past. For instance, when you compare, the sort of the stuff that we're getting these days against what Raimi used to do, where you get sort of a fully fleshed out side story with Harry Osborn, with Aunt May, with Mary Jane, and everybody sort of had their own things going on, where we've sort of just narrowed down into the heroes and how they bounce off of these side characters as almost like insta foils or forever foils. I've never really been a fan of that. So I think it's interesting that you've sort of kind of zoomed out so much that you want more of more of sort of the supporting cast to kind of play a role in these stories. That's interesting to me. The one thing I want to zero in on that you said, and because this is honestly where I felt the film was the strongest, was the 2 Barry performance. I can see how folks thought that 18-year-old Barry was a little bit annoying, but here's the beauty of it. And I don't think a lot of people have accounted for that. Is that's the Barry that's the Barry that would have been had he not lost his mom and dad, had he grown up well adjusted, had he grown up with friends, had he not been so socially awkward or anxious or any of the other sort of idiosyncrasies that older Barry has to deal with. So that's the version that we would have saw. So I thought that was very thoughtful in the development of the film, was to sort of think about it that way. And I honestly, I feel like Ezra Miller is a natural comedian. I don't know if you agree with me on that point. How do you feel about Ezra Miller as a comedic actor?
I think Ezra Miller is a fantastic actor all around.
Okay.
I appreciate what they were going for with younger Barry, and at times it really, really worked. Like when Keaton's Batman throws the pizza cutter and it lodges into the door, and he just laughs like, oh my God. So to me, that was fantastic. It was just they went a little too hard on how annoying he was.
Right.
And I appreciated that. I did like the fact that R. Barry said, oh my God, this is what other people see.
Yes. It was so smart, right?
That was really good.
Yeah.
There are things I love about this movie.
Yeah.
And probably, 5 out of 10 of them are Michael Keaton. But no, there are legitimately things that I really love about the movie. But I did feel like I got tired of young Barry's laugh, really. It was his laugh.
Yeah, his laugh is annoying. Come on, I can agree with that, but I think that
it was like the goats in Love and Thunder.
Yeah. Good comparison. The goats in Love and Thunder. That's a great callback. Yes. Yeah, his laugh was annoying, but in some places it was charming. But in some places it was grating. You know what I mean? There's definitely some moments where you're like, okay, again, seriously, let's tone the laugh down a little bit. But like I said, he was just so different to older Barry, and I really think that added so much dynamic, not only to the character and how the character bumped up against older Barry, but Ezra's performance. It just made me respect Ezra at a whole new level. I don't know if you heard these stories, but apparently Miller was like working overtime on the film, like just like maddening hours just to get it done. Like, did you hear those same things too, or?
I did. And, I think there is a big possibility that work on this movie may have caused some of the mental issues that they're dealing with now.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
This movie has been through the ringer. It was announced for a 2018 release initially.
Yep.
And it's gone through 3 or 4 different directors. It's like there was a point where Ezra teamed up with Grant Morrison to write their own version of this movie that was sidelined by Warner Brothers. And just the opening credits will tell you the tale a little bit, where you see so many writers attached to this script.
I was gonna bring that up, dude. I think it's 13 or 14 writers that have worked on this script.
Mm-hmm.
That's insane.
It's a lot.
That's insane.
And DC on Screen, our show, what we do is we cover the DC news pretty much every week.
Yep.
So we have been following these changes week by week. And that's also a thing where, like, I'm wondering, did I give it a fair shot, or am I letting my knowledge of what's been going on with this movie really kind of taint that? But, then again, I enjoyed Shazam! Fury of the Gods, and I know how much Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson screwed with that movie. So,
yeah, I enjoyed Shazam too, and I enjoyed Black Adam to a degree.
I did too.
Yeah. I think that there was merit in all those films, to be honest with you. But let's talk about the writers a little bit, because I don't know about you, but I wasn't a fan of Christina Hodson. I thought that she really missed the mark on Birds of Prey. It was just a little too preachy for me. There's not a single positive male character in that entire film, and I felt that was really to its detriment. And how are you going to have Harley Quinn attack the Gotham police station and not have to deal with Batman? That doesn't happen. And I felt like they could have been, there's a little bit more forethought. And if anything, to bring the conversation back to The Flash, that's one of the things I loved about this movie, was the level of forethought. But when you look at the roster of writers, like, it's almost like, how could you miss with that many minds on this script, right? Like, it's like, as long as somebody sort of has in the back of their mind, that this is a Flash story, there's a lot to pull from. And Flash is a character that can almost write himself in a sense. And then if you're working off if you're working from adaptation too, where you're taking a Flashpoint story, there's not really a lot of coloring out of the lines that you can do. But I think that they did a lot to add a lot of emotional bandwidth to this particular tale and this particular movie. So yeah, going back to Christina Hodson, were you a fan of are you a fan of hers? Were you a fan of Birds of Prey?
I loved Birds of Prey.
Okay.
I didn't have any issues with it, except for the fact that they went in and changed Kathy Yan's original story. There's a Yan cut.
Are you serious? I did not know that.
Absolutely serious.
Okay.
I don't mind that there were no positive male role. That wasn't the point of the movie. Like, this was Harley's story. This was the Birds of Prey's story. I do prefer the Cassie Cain from the comics, but that's just my preference. But I really, I loved Ewan McGregor. I loved the guy that played Zaz. I can't remember his name at the moment. And as for your Where Was Batman while she was, raiding the police, the police department, the Flash answers that. Batman needed help from Barry because he was doing something at the time. So she was probably doing something at the time, or he was probably doing something at the time that she was raiding the Gotham Police Department.
Possibly.
It's the same argument as like, well, if this world-ending thing happened, why didn't the Avengers show up? They're busy. It's okay.
Yeah. No, I can see the rationale in that. But as a writer myself, I'm always I'm all about hyper-realism. Like, that's why I love Zack Snyder so much. And it's just not realistic to not have, for me, through my lens, it's not realistic to not have a positive male character in a story. Just to have the story be completely void of any positive role model, any sort of positive depiction of a male character just doesn't make any sense to me, because that's not how the real world works. You know what I'm saying? And granted,
Well, we're not dealing with realism in Birds of Prey, though.
No, I know
we're
that.
We're dealing with Harley's perspective.
No, I know that, but I'm saying, like, even, yes, that absolutely that is her perspective, and the story is being told from her perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also this zoomed out picture of what that world looks like. So, I just wanted, for instance, if it was me rewriting it, I would have had a Joker henchman that just really had either like some sort of like charming little crush on Harley, or I would have had somebody in there to sort of kind of help her along. You know what I'm saying? Just because that sort of balances things out. It doesn't because once I think, for me, and I'm speaking as a writer again, somebody, who produces and writes content myself, once you get to the level of where you're sort of drawing hard lines like that, it becomes almost parody. And I don't want to see parody in comic book media. I want to see satire, but I don't want to see parody. And I've seen that in a number of different movies. And then again, it also sort of exacerbates these tired cliches that have sort of been popping up in modern day cinema. But again, we're not here to talk about Birds of Prey. I just wanted to get your thoughts on Christina Hodson. So you were a fan, so that's cool.
Yeah.
I was a fan of John Francis Daley and his writing partner. I thought that they were, and honestly, I got to go out a limb here, and I wish I knew how much was who, like who put who in what. But I think like John Francis Daley and his partner, I feel like there's a lot of them in this script. I really do. I don't know if that's the vibe that you got, or maybe you've done some digging as like this DC news hound. What can you tell us about that you know?
I don't know anything. Like, they have kept it a pretty well under wraps about like what they used from each individual writers,
right,
or writing team that came in. But I do think that like Christina Hodson, from what I've seen, and John Francis Daley and his partner, like, I feel like they do share a modicum of humor points, and they're pretty good. I think they're both pretty good with hitting like emotional character beats. So, and it is hard to look back and say like, oh, to judge Christina Hodson based on Birds of Prey, because it is such an unreliable narrator in Harley that it's almost like, and it wouldn't be the first time Warner Brothers did this, it's almost like they were saying, make this Deadpool but Harley. And they literally had a trailer editing company come in and re-edit the entirety of Suicide Squad, Ayer's cut, or Ayer's movie, to make it more like Deadpool. So I feel like it's hard to look at Hodson as a screenwriter based on Birds of Prey, because I don't watch Transformers. I don't know. Right. I know she did that Bumblebee movie.
Actually, Bumblebee was quite good. For what it was, it's a good movie. And I'm not saying, like, I'm not advocating to judge a screenwriter by one screenplay. That's not what I'm trying to say. Like I said, I would have done things differently. Yeah.
So would I.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so going back, just to take us back real quick, I wanted to get a sense of what your thoughts were. Did you catch the whole, Barry dynamic that they were trying to create? Like, did you, like, on your first watch, did you pick up that it was almost intentional to almost create this conflicting dynamic for old Barry by giving him young Barry in his face all the time that had his mom and his dad? Was that something that you sort of took away on your first watch, or is that something that you sort of kind of realized in the wake of seeing the movie?
Oh no, I caught it.
Cool.
And that's one of my favorite things in the movie.
Yeah, me too. I love it.
And I love how it comes to a head in the Batcave where he's freaking out over him, throwing darts at the stuffed animal that she gave him.
The monkey. Yep.
Yeah, the monkey.
Yeah.
And being like, you don't know what you had. And the way Ezra played young Barry, when he's listening to Bruce and older Barry discussing their parents and realizing I was supposed to lose my mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was, I could have used more, but it was enough of a catalyst for him to wind up becoming Dark Flash.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I do want to talk about Dark Flash because I honestly think that the forethought that went in, see, that's the thing I keep coming back to with this movie. And I don't know if it's because the script has taken so long and it's had so many writers. But there's an incredible amount of forethought that went into this film. Like, it's just staggering how well developed some of the concepts and the ideas and some of the payoffs are in this movie. And, I do want to walk through those with you too, but we haven't talked about what you liked about the movie yet.
Well, I mean, I mentioned a few things already, like Keaton, and I loved the what they were going for and what they actually achieved several times with older Barry and younger Barry.
Right.
I really loved Cara Zor-El. I wanted so much more of her. Sasha Calle was so fantastic in that role. And I know she's currently talking with Warner Brothers right now. I know Gunn is developing an adaptation of Tom King's Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which is a fantastic story. And I really hope that that Sasha Calle winds up playing the role again, albeit in this new universe. I would have liked more with her, but I loved Keaton. I loved everything with Keaton. Like Michael Keaton just has my heart, man. I don't know what to tell you about that. I loved his CGI. Like that CGI actually looked really great.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like, if I was going to pick out some of the more polished CGI moments, I would say it's that. And I don't know if it's because the scenes were dark and his character is in a dark color, because that definitely makes it easy. Like, I don't know if you've ever shot film or lit a scene, but the more light that you paint onto something, the more detail you can see. So if it's bad, it can look really bad. And darkness is kind of actually your friend in those moments. But I did like the balance of that for sure. I thought that was great. So what was it about Sasha Calle's performance that you really liked about it?
I felt like she had something, like you could look in her eyes and see she had more going on, like more understanding of what the character was to her. She had purpose to the very few actions she actually had in the film. And for as much as we got, I thought she did a killer job. Yeah, I agree with that. So one of the criticisms I've seen, and I'd love to get your take on this, was that she was too stoic. Like, she didn't fit the Cara Zor-El sort of archetype. And while at the same time I can agree with that she didn't fit the archetype, I think that this version of Cara Zor-El was a reflection of her time locked away for maybe 20 plus years. Right? Absolutely.
I don't think she's coming out of that like all smiley and upbeat and cheerful. I think she's coming out of that like fucking tortured and traumatized. And I can understand where she was coming from as far as her emotional place in that story.
Absolutely. Like that's what I would have said. Like, I haven't seen anyone make that argument, and now I'm annoyed by it, because I'm like, she just spent like friggin' 20 years in a gulag.
Yeah.
What do you want? Like, what, you think you're going to be happy? Like, of course. And that's one of the things I loved about what she did, is she was so raw. She was so angry.
Yep. I
with
agree.
Zod, with, when she finds out what he did to Kal-El, and she just did such a fantastic job with what she was given.
Yeah.
And I could watch 3 more movies with her.
Okay, I got to ask you this, because I've seen some funny takes on this. What was your thought on the spit, the super spit?
The super spit? I don't even know that I know what you're talking about. What? Explain this to me.
Remember when Sasha was on the roof and she's talking to Barry, or young Barry, and he's like watching her as she's like gaining her power back from the sun, and then he's like, "Are you okay now?" And she turns around and she hawks a loogie at one of the gargoyles on Wayne Manor, and just explodes.
Okay.
You didn't catch that?
Yeah, now that you're talking about it, like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I just thought it was an interesting thing for Supergirl, of all people, to showcase her powers was a spit. Like, I don't think I've ever seen that in any comic book media where somebody used super spit. Like, usually you see somebody punch something, you see somebody use their laser vision, you see somebody do something, but with spit, like, to me that was interesting. I just thought it was kind of, thought it was kind of crazy, but
I don't know, I think that just like knocked the movie up a couple points for me. Like, that's kind of badass. Like, that actually does feel like Tom King's Supergirl from Woman of Tomorrow, to be honest.
Nice. Well, I'm glad I could heighten your enjoyment a little bit on this one episode.
You did it.
All right. High five. I did my job.
You
This
did
is
it.
great. This is great. But yeah, no, I thought that was hilarious. Like you see her chalk back a loogie, and then boom, just as a fucking gargoyle explodes. And I was like, holy shit. I was like, that's wild. That is wild. And that's Sasha Calle from like The Young and the Restless, like soap operas, like spitting, like, oh dude, I was just like, wow. I was like, holy shit. Anyways, okay, so Keaton, this is where our conversation I think is going to get very interesting. Okay. I love Michael Keaton. Like there's nobody that in modern day cinema or television that I love more. Like one of my favorite roles is obviously Dope Sick. I thought he was just incredible, magnanimous, and just so electric, and so generous, and also like just allowing the audience just to invade with every scene that he did. But honestly, dude, I can't reconcile him as Batman or Bruce Wayne. I just can't do it.
Really?
Yeah. And for me,
in any of the movies that he was in, or just in this one,
I like them. Okay, I like the Batman '89. I think those are really fun movies, right? But then, so one of the problems I have with Hollywood is somewhat of these weird relationships that directors build with certain stars, right? Tim Burton has Michael Keaton and Johnny Depp, and Quentin Tarantino has Leonardo DiCaprio, and I won't say Brad Pitt because I think he's only used Brad Pitt once. Yes, only once. Twice. No, twice. He was in True Romance as well, but he wasn't the director of that.
Sam Raimi does it. And a lot of people do it.
Yeah. So sometimes I feel like it's a little overused, and I think that sometimes directors are too dependent upon it, and I feel like Burton was too dependent upon it for Batman, because for me, Keaton doesn't have the physicality, he doesn't have the look, he doesn't fit Bruce Wayne. He fits, like, he's got the energy, sure, he's got the energy, and he's fun to watch, but the physicality, his physical representation just does not fit the role of Bruce Wayne. Like, and sure, I'm going off of comic books, I'm going off of animated stuff. Like, to me, Bruce Wayne is a guy with a huge jaw, and like he's broad-shouldered, and he's a big guy. He's like 6'4", and Keaton just doesn't fit that for me. He doesn't scream that at me, But I enjoy watching him play Batman. I do. But to me, Ben Affleck is the quintessential. Like, he is definitely the quintessential Batman for me, because he fits the physical. He fits the physical requirements.
I would say Ben Affleck is my favorite live action Batman.
Okay.
And Michael Keaton is my second favorite live action Batman. For me, it was I think the first movie I went to go see was Batman '89 when I was 6.
Right.
So
me too,
he's
bro.
been my Batman.
Yeah, me too.
For my whole life. Mm-hmm. Now, if you say who's your favorite Batman of all time, Kevin Conroy. Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, he's great.
No question.
He's great.
But I don't want to judge this movie for, not being exactly what I wanted. But how do you have Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck as Batman, both of them in the same movie, and not have them meet?
I agree, but how would it even be possible? That's the problem too.
It's comic book science. This whole movie was bullshit.
Here we go. Frank's gonna start talking about reality again. So
open a portal, man.
Hey, I hear you, mate. I hear you. I would have loved to have seen it. I would have definitely loved to have seen that, but at the same time, I would have rolled my eyes like 60 times, because that just would have been too much for me.
As for the physicality, I've got to bring this up. Have you ever seen the movie Desperate Measures with Michael Keaton and Andy Garcia?
No, I haven't.
Check that movie out. It's not like, a life-changing movie,
right?
But it is a very fun movie, and I love the ending,
right?
And I love Michael Keaton's performance. He is a serial killer who is the only match for Andy Garcia's dying son. Like, he's like the only person who has this rare bone marrow type, and he's the only one that give him this kid a transplant. But he is like a total sociopath and he gives like this great like Southern draw speech about like I can't imagine a world where it would matter. I can't imagine a God that would care. Keaton just kills it, but he gets jacked. For Michael Keaton, he's pretty jacked in that movie, and there's this great scene of him like lifting weights in a cell, and I just kept thinking like, I guess they could have been underneath those turtlenecks in the '89 Batman. I guess those muscles could have been there, but God, it would have been nice if he had just been jacked for Batman. But that movie like helps me reconcile Batman and Bruce Wayne, Batman, and Michael Keaton being the same.
I might have to watch that then. I might have to watch that and then come back to you with my thoughts on the physicality of Michael Keaton as Batman. No, it's definitely interesting. So let's talk about some of the specific stuff. Let's talk about first that opening action sequence, the mix of Batman, the mix of Flash. I know you weren't a fan of the baby shower scene, which it is come to affectionately be known.
I did like that line.
Yeah, it was funny, right? It was definitely funny. And come on, like, let's give it up for Alfred. That guy is just fucking flawless. Jeremy Irons as Alfred is just fucking flawless, like literally flawless. Every time I see him on screen or you just hear his voice over the intercom, he's always got like the most hilarious fucking thing to say, and it's just fucking epic. Like you couldn't ask for anything more,
Yeah, I loved him. Always do.
Yeah. Okay, so as far as the baby shower scene, was it the choreography of it? Was it the CGI of it that you didn't like? What was it that really kind of?
Well, I didn't like the CGI.
Right.
And it did take me out of it, but my primary issue with that, it just took so long. And I get that they were setting up that he had to like very slowly and carefully move the babies. And it was, set up for later, and that was fine. But it just took a really, really, really long time for us to get to it. And they had like the dog and the woman screaming and him slowly putting the microwave over the baby. There was just a lot, and it took a really long time.
Did it make you laugh? Did it make you laugh at all?
Not really.
Really?
No.
Okay. All right. I was laughing. No. I was definitely laughing. Okay, so for me, and I don't know if you read this Flash story, but there's a Flash story where basically Barry has to he has to take apart a car before it hits somebody to save them. And that's sort of what it reminded me of. Like, I've always been very critical of any Flash property not showcasing the extent of his powers, like the extent of what he can do. Because, dude, on paper, honestly, and actually I want to get your take on this. To me, Flash is the most powerful character in all of comic book, like all of it. And the reason is because he can literally phase any sort of attack he wants to. He can move at the speed of light, so you can't really hit him. And he can literally use any of his appendages to fucking create a hurricane, like just underneath you. So to me, he's almost omnipotent. You know what I'm saying? So there's a tendency to depower him to be able to tell these stories, though. You see that regularly because like he could just run through people, phasing with his hand out, like just like like the phase knife, and they're done. That's it. Like he would murder everybody. So it's always fun to see the extent of Flash's powers without him being omnipotent. Like it's always fun for me to sort of kind of do that calculus on screen and be like, oh, okay, they got this creative with that. And I thought it was a really creative showcase of the power set. And the one thing I think is interesting about speedsters in movies too, is when the speedster is the main protagonist, you have to do the slow motion version of it. Like you have to do like him moving through speed and time. When they're not a protagonist, you can do sort of the fast stuff all the time, sort of the way they did in the Eternals. But when it is the protagonist, you kind of have to tell the story with the slow motion stuff, and that does sort of underwhelm the audience to the level of the degree of power from these speedsters. If you ask me, I think sometimes it can get a little bit boring for sure. But
I think you have to use it sparingly, and I think one of the great. Sorry, I just blanked it. One of the great examples of how they used it sparingly was the X-Men movies with Quicksilver.
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
It's like you build up to that scene and you make it like a masterpiece within, a triptych. You just really just hone in on it and make it important. And otherwise, I love the way they did it the way Zach did it in Zach's Justice League.
Yes.
Like that was perfect.
Yep. The one where he, the one where they're coming out of the building and he has to destroy all the debris that's coming down. Like that's a good way to do it. Like just when you see him popping and you can sort of see him like in the light as he's moving around. I think that's a really smart way to do it for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, not to, beat the horse on comic book lore,
right.
But, Barry is faster than Superman. Barry is
absolutely
God tier.
Yep.
But comic book wise, Wally is more powerful. Wally West, his kid Flash, who becomes the Flash when Barry sacrifices himself in the Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yep.
Wally is more powerful than Barry ever was.
Yeah, I need to read more Wally West. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go back and if you go back, go back, read Mark Waid's Wally West run. Chef's kiss.
Yeah, I do like Mark Waid. I did like his Daredevil run, so that does make a lot of sense to me.
He also writes a hell of a Superman. I don't know if you've.
Yeah, you know what? I think Mark Waid would be great with Superman, to be honest, because Daredevil, like he sort of tried to do Daredevil. Actually, he did Daredevil in a very abstract way. I don't know if you've read that run, but he sort of tried to start him off as like this positive, this positive, hopeful, optimistic character. But then you realize that based on the story that came before that story, it was all a show. Like he was literally trying to fake it to make it to deal with his depression. And it's such a powerful, powerful story with a lot of subtext and a lot of allegory in it. Wade can definitely do the positive stuff. And by the way, he did Tower of Babel. So, that's that's fire. That's pure fire in the
absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm always going to be a proponent of Wally West and Kyle Rayner as Flash and Green Lantern, because that Grant Morris's JLA run really brought me into those characters and made me go back for them. At a seminal time in my life when I was like about 13, 14 years old.
Nice.
But have you read Kingdom Come?
I haven't read Kingdom Come yet. It's on my list. Comics. Listen, dude, I don't like. You may share my take on this, but comics is literally one of those I have to quit my job to catch up kind of things. Like, yeah, it's nuts, dude.
Yeah,
it's nuts.
But if you have a list, put Kingdom Come at the top of that list.
Okay.
Like they're like bringing in like the Book of Revelation, like the 7 Justice League members of the 7 Seals, the Angels with the 7 Seals.
Oh,
like
shit.
It gets crazy dark.
Oh shit,
crazy dark.
That sounds right up my alley, man. Religion.
It is fantastic, and it's all done by Alex Ross.
No, that's dope. I do like Alex Ross a lot. That sounds like a lot of religious allegory. I get into that shit heavy, so I'm down for that. That's awesome. The opening sequence with Batfleck. What were your thoughts? Did you like it?
No, not really.
Wow.
Like,
Wow. Okay. Unpack this for me. Please unpack this for me.
I was fine with him, except that I never felt like he was there. I felt like he was all CGI and they like poorly grafted like the lower part of Affleck's face onto the cowl that looked like a cartoon. It just looked really bad to me. And then I didn't like the lassoed bit. Like we already did that in Justice League.
I love the lasso jokes. I'm not gonna lie, man. It's funny when they get caught off guard, just sort of sharing their inner truths. I don't know. That's just me, but
the problem, the thing that I didn't like. Okay, so I didn't like that Affleck. His thing with the lasso of truth was that he was like, oh, I wouldn't have to do this if I would just, help the poor or whatever. But like, canonically, Batman does a lot of, like, Bruce Wayne has a ton of crap going on helping the poor.
I agree with that.
So like,
I definitely agree with that. Yeah.
And it's not true either, because like, if you help the poor, that's great. But what the hell is that going to do against Darkseid, for Christ's sake? Like, what are we really getting into here? Like, you're talking about like end of world, and you're the world's greatest detective, and kind of like the brains of the Justice League. No, you'd still have to do this, buddy. Like, it was a dumb joke. It felt like they grabbed some internet memes and were like, yeah, see, we're gonna make Batman admit that he's a fascist. You know?
Yeah, that's yeah. There's definitely a hate on for the Bat right now. There's definitely a hate on for the Bat,
and
yeah,
and then to turn Barry's thing into just like a virgin joke, like, oh man, really? Like, are we just?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, that was a stretch because I don't believe that at all. Sorry, that's not something I would buy. The kid went to college and he's what, like in his he's almost 30 now. Like that's not something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that just seems unacceptable.
You know,
but. Yeah.
If you've listened to my show, you know I'm not against dumb dick jokes.
Right. Okay.
But, I mean, one of my favorite things is like in the Justice League animated show where they keep making jokes about him being the fastest man alive.
Yes, I love that one. Yes. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny to me too.
And it's obvious, but, I don't know. And also, like, am I wrong? I was always under the impression that the lasso of truth didn't just make you spit out weird, like say weird shit. Like, I thought there had to be like a question, some sort of intention behind the lasso of truth.
Maybe a writer's just like abusing it for comedy purposes. That may be the case.
They like that, and to be like, oh, make the guys say that Wonder Woman's hot. Yeah, everybody knows she's hot.
Everybody knows she's hot. And the way they keep structuring the scenes with her, like being face to face with Ben, she's so over sexualized. It's ridiculous. Like they're all just like, they're all like little kids at school. They're just like, oh, look, it's Wonder Woman. Why? Like why? Like Jesus. And
maybe it's to hide the CGI or the green screen or whatever behind her. But it looks like when they shoot her, she's all like greased up.
Yeah. Like
not her personally, but like it's like they greased the lens like old movies did,
like soap opera style.
Yeah, like give it that glamour gleam, like old Star Trek, the original series. Yeah. That's what it feels like to me. It's like, okay, yeah, we get it. We had Billy Batson have a hard on for her, and okay, yeah, she's more than that. Yeah, she's like a flying, battling, representation of hope. And the last few times we've seen her, she's been made into a joke about how dudes want to boink her.
I agree with that. Yeah, I do think it's overplayed at this point for sure, the Wonder Woman stuff. But it is Gal Gadot. But here's the other side of the coin too, especially with Batman is concerned, as far as Bruce Wayne is concerned. You don't think Bruce Wayne is like on the regular meeting up with women that look just as great as she does, or even better? Like, I don't think he would be so flustered around Wonder Woman. I just don't see it happening. Plus, it's also in contrast to the way that we see them interact in BVS. Like, there's none of that shit. There's none of it.
Right.
Right? Like, there's none of it to support it. So, okay, so you weren't a fan of the Affleck action sequence. I loved it. I thought it was great. I loved the Bat bike. I loved all, the chase element of it. The part where he gets, the bike gets destroyed in the fire, and then you see him come through the flames wrapped in his cape. That was fucking sick. Like that is quintessential, just like awesome Batman stuff for me. I really, really loved that. I really thought that was great.
I did like that part.
Yeah. Because it was just so shocking to see him emerge just with his cape just flying down. That was really dope. And
I always wondered if I would like the blue and gray, and now we've seen it.
I do. I like the blue and gray.
Yeah. You know what? I liked Keaton's blue and gray costume.
I saw that in the back too. I thought that was really cool. Yeah.
And you know what? I have an action figure that came out in like 1992 or something.
Superpowers?
That is actually, I think it was at that time Legends of the Bat.
Oh, okay.
It was a Michael Keaton figure.
Oh shit. Okay.
It's his costume, but he's blue and gray. And that was like the one I played with all the time when I was a kid. So like seeing that in the cave, I was like, holy shit, it's canon.
That's dope. That's dope. So this is the first feature film we've gotten complete, Barry Allen. Like, this is a Flash story. How did you feel about the characterization of Barry Allen from comics, the TV show, et cetera, translated into this film? Like, did you like the way that they did Barry?
I was fine with the way they did Barry for the most part. Like, I do think they have taken a little, they've taken a little too much of Wally.
Yeah. Okay.
And infused Barry with Wally. Like, Wally is jokier. He's a little more awkward.
Yep.
Barry was like really straight-laced, kind of a goof, but not in the same way at all. Like, he's sort of just more of a nerd, I think. Like, more of a straight-laced nerd. And that, I get it. You had a whole generation who grew up on Wally, and most of them probably, especially in the general audience, probably aren't going to get that it was two different guys. Or, so whatever. And that's fine. I think all interpretations are valid, even when I don't like them. So, I do like this. I do like this version of Barry, and I'm sad that it flopped so much because we'll probably never see him again.
Right. Right.
But we don't know. Like, James Gunn likes Ezra Miller.
Okay.
Based on what he said, following Ezra's performance on Peacemaker.
Okay, that's good.
So, who knows? It might do really well on streaming.
Right.
I'm sure. And Gunn likes, what's his face? Zachary Levi as well. Like, he recommended him for the role of Shazam.
Well, he was up for Star-Lord, so that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. As far as what you're saying about streaming, I think the film is going to do well on streaming. I really do. I'm kind of hopeful of that, because I definitely feel like there are a lot of content creators that have just misrepresented this film from day one, and it really kind of sucks. Sorry, I was intrigued by your take as far as you more or less were expecting more based on the landscape that was created. You just sort of felt like everything was a little bit sort of shortchanged, like as far as, not enough exploration of the characters, et cetera, et cetera. How did you feel about this as a multiversal time travel story? What were your thoughts on that?
Let me think. I enjoyed it for the time travel elements. I enjoyed Michael Keaton's analogy. Like, that was one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, that was
of the
cool,
movie,
right? Yeah.
With the spaghetti.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I've referenced young Barry going like, am I the Parmesan? No, the metaphor's over.
Yeah, that was the funny part.
But, I loved Michael Keaton saying, when you change things, it doesn't just change the future, it reverberates in the past as well.
Yeah, retrocausal.
That's really neat.
Retrocausal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I love what they were going for in introducing the multiverse. Like, I love what they were going for in all of the cameos.
Yeah.
I just, didn't think it looked good.
Right.
And also, it haunts me a little bit that, like, all of those, whatever they were, timeline spheres colliding, from what I understand, that was originally supposed to be setting up Crisis on Infinite Earths. That was like, the movie was supposed to end with a post-credit sequence of Bruce waking up, having understood that the crisis was coming and having to warn Barry or whatever.
Okay.
Or something like that. But so, and by the way, the reasons the different timelines were apparently colored that way was because it was setting up Darkest Night, Darkest Night timeline with all the different lantern colors.
Really?
Yeah, and just knowing certain things, I wish I didn't know.
Okay. Okay. All right, I'm going to have to start digging wherever you're digging for information, because I find that interesting. I did not know that it was a reference to Darkest Night. I did. I think anybody who knows DC picked up that it was, sort of a nod to Crisis. And I wasn't a fan of the cameo choices. I was just like, okay, but it was only like, for me, like, once publicity started for this movie, that was sort of the one thing that everybody wanted to double down on, was Crisis. And they wanted to double down on the fact that, they sort of did these CGI versions of Helen Slater and Christopher Reeves and et cetera, and George Reeves. And these are all past people, and people sort of held that up as like the greatest sin in the world, and they were all angry about it and publicizing it on their Twitter and saying, how could they? And, WB at it again, no respect for artists, blah, 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 blah. But that wasn't what annoyed me about it. Like, it just didn't feel, I don't know. It just didn't feel needed. Like, seeing Nicolas Cage as Superman, I didn't care. I could give two shits about that, to be honest.
No. It was fun to see it, but at the same time, I was like, it would have been nice if instead of that, you had Grant Gustin.
Yeah.
Or John Wesley Shipp, or both.
Yeah.
Like, it's a freaking Flash movie. Why don't you have the other two versions of Flash in the movie?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're doing all these DC cameos.
Yeah. And it was interesting that they showed a Flash cameo, and he was in the Chrono Bowl too, doing the exact same thing, but there was nothing, like, you couldn't really tell what was going on in his Chrono Bowl. And was it simultaneous? Like, was it congruent with the Flash with our Flash doing it? Like, that was a little,
I don't know.
That was a little odd. But yeah.
It was just a generic CGI Jay Garrick running.
Yeah. So.
And I don't know.
One of the other things you mentioned is that you felt like the family dynamic was a little under fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt it was almost pitch perfect.
Really?
Yeah, granted, you don't get to spend a lot of time with Barry's mom and Barry's dad, but I thought Ron Livingston was great as Barry's dad. I do love Billy Crudup though. Billy Crudup is one of my favorite actors of all time. I think he's incredible. I don't know if you've seen
The Morning Show.
Yeah. Crudup in that is amazing, dude. He's so good. Yeah, he's so good. But I think Ron Livingston did a great job. I don't know the name of the actress that played Barry's mom, but I thought she was so charming and so warm and so nurturing and just so sweet. And I really loved the family dynamic, and I love how they kind of gave you those smaller flashbacks. I think in a comic book movie, you don't really need to spend that much time fleshing out the non sort of plot driving points of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think for pace, I think it's always a good idea, where less is more. But yeah, I was pretty happy with that part. What do you think of the Bruce Wayne moments in this movie?
Which Bruce?
Oh, Ben. Let's talk about Ben first.
Yeah, that was my favorite part of his appearance, was just hanging outside of that restaurant talking to Barry and being like, you could destroy everything, just one blade of grass, man. Don't do it,
Butterfly effect.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And by the way, I love that they referenced Zack Snyder's Justice League several times in this movie.
Me too.
And I know a few people were like, oh, big deal. It was 2 lines. No, in the Chrono Bowl, like, those are shots from Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Absolutely. Yep.
They are not from Justice League.
No.
So I loved that. And, but yeah, I loved Ben. Like, when he felt more authentically his Batman there than he did in the action scenes.
One of the things that I was surprised in terms of one of the things I enjoyed about this film, because I'm not a really big fan of comic book movie comedy. Like, I feel like it's been overdone and beaten to death in some senses.
Mm-hmm.
Marvel has got a real good reputation of undercutting a dramatic, heavy moment with some cheesy ass joke, and that really just drives me up the wall. And I'm like, why? Like, just let it breathe, man. Let people sit with the moment. Mm-hmm. I felt like the comedy in this movie was really good. I felt like it was well executed. I felt like it was well timed. There's definitely a lot of physical sort of Pratt kind of style comedy.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was funny. Most of the moments I thought were funny, but it was definitely more of the character moments. Like, I really like the whole the one where young Barry was like, should I just emperor this guy? I fucking howled, dude. I was in the theater just howling. I was like, that is one of the funniest things I've ever heard in my life. Should I just emperor this guy? He just sticks his hands out like the emperor. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I couldn't get enough of that. What do you think of the comedy?
Sometimes it was too over the top for me.
Okay. Can you cite any specific examples?
Yeah, all of the stuff falling out of everything when Iris was over.
Oh yeah, Pratt comedy. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. I wasn't big on that. Sometimes, like, the little things Ezra says as Barry, like when he phases through to get the beers out of someone else's
that was funny
place. That was fine. the fact that he did it, and the fact I actually like the fact that they exploded, because they would.
Yeah, that was a good time. That was good, right? Yeah.
But just the little just gotta get them from my refrigerator.
This is where we keep the beers.
Yeah, that was a little much.
I love that part. That part was great.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I get it, and I usually view a lot of the Marvel comedy that, as you put it, that subverts the drama. Yeah. I usually am more okay with it than a lot of other people are.
Right.
So I didn't really have a big problem with it here. I didn't feel like it was too much most of the time.
Okay.
Really, the only thing that was really got on my nerves was young Barry laughing.
Okay.
It was just a little too much. It was just too much throughout.
Okay. But, what about the Speedy Gonzalez pose? That was so fucking good, dude. I laughed.
Yeah, that was funny.
Just before young Barry takes off into the streets with those new powers. Mm-hmm. That was so good.
Yeah, no, I didn't have any problem with that. That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you impressed in the comedic chemistry that Ezra had with himself?
I was actually pretty like some of the CGI is a little dodgy sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes it looks like younger Barry's face is sliding off.
Yeah, sure. There's some parts. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought they actually did a pretty good job with that timing.
Yeah.
That was shocking. And for as much shit as I give this movie, I actually do it works the other way. Mm-hmm. When you're look at all the administrations that work here. Look at all the screenwriters. Actually, this movie wound up being pretty damn good.
Yeah, I agree with that.
For everything it had working against it.
I agree with that. When you equate all the clusterfuckery that has happened with this film for what it is, it's actually quite a miracle, because this actually should be almost, the level of Coppola in the jungle trying to complete Apocalypse Now. Mm-hmm. That's how much fuckery was going on during this movie. And I'm glad that you brought up the whole thing about maybe some of the turbulence in the production of this film contributed to Ezra's sort of mental state. I think that's important. I really do, because I didn't consider that. But then when you go back and you look at something like Apocalypse Now, and you look at what happened with Martin Sheen, then that completely makes sense. Martin Sheen almost died on the set of Apocalypse Now. He punched a hole through a mirror. He had a mild heart attack because of the stress, right? And I think maybe that's something that people haven't or sort of, brought into the calculus of how they feel about everything in terms of where Ezra or what Ezra's been up to and kind of how that all fits into the picture. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
And I don't want to excuse shitty behavior or use that to, but also I don't necessarily believe that all of the allegations were true, because when you start looking into the police reports and stuff,
I agree with
it's
that.
They, Ezra gets taken to the prison, and then he's let go an hour later or whatever. So it's oh, okay, it wasn't what they thought it was, or there's that body cam footage where he was like, guys, I called you. So I was the one assaulted. So you start to see you start to look at certain outlets who are very anti-trans. You start to see what they're saying. People are just they read a headline, they don't know who or care where it's from, and they're oh, okay, this person's a problem.
Yeah, I agree.
There are lots of, and I'm not saying Ezra didn't do anything messed up, because they certainly did.
Yep.
But there's two sides to every story.
Absolutely. And there's also a lot of benefit and a lot of financial windfall when the right people start amplifying the right stories, in terms of the right story being related to whoever they're trying to cater to, right? And they put their own little narrative and their spin on it, and they can turn it into YouTube revenue. So there's definitely something to that for sure. So one of the big critiques I saw that I sort of kind of got really annoyed with was somebody more or less shit all over this movie because of the food scenes. They were it was 2 hours of watching Ezra Miller, choke down food and stuff his face and make disgusting chewing and gulping noises throughout the entire thing. That wasn't my takeaway at all. What are your thoughts on on such a well thought out critique.
I have not seen anybody complaining about that, but
you didn't really?
No, but it sounds like they have that disorder. What is that disorder where you can't stand hearing people breathe or chew? My sister has it. My sister cannot stand listening to people chew. Like, she has to
Really?
go in
Is that
another
a
room.
thing? I did not know that's a
absolutely
thing. Shit.
That is absolutely a thing, and I don't remember what it's called. But yeah, I'm gonna look it up.
Interesting. I thought it was funny when they introduced young Barry, like the first shot of young Barry.
Misophonia.
Misophonia.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting name, Misophonia. But when they introduce young Barry, he's kicking over people's garbage cans and recycling cans. Why? Like that's such a weird thing to do.
The younger Barry is public Ezra Miller. He's just running around kicking things over and causing a ruckus.
Yeah, he literally gets introduced as he's walking across the street to his house. He's kicking over people's garbage cans and shit. I was like, why? Like, well, why is that the first shot of Ezra as a young Barry? Very odd choice.
Where was he doing it to get it out of his way?
No, man, he's just literally walking beside. He just gives a fucking hoof.
Oh God,
Yeah.
I mean that might actually be an interesting foreshadowing of him not caring about other people's lives or property as long as it behooves him to change things.
Could be. But see, that's the thing. I don't take him as that thoughtless. I think maybe it was Andy and him sort of kind of doing something sort of funny in response to the allegations, maybe. But
I know that sounds familiar.
What does?
Someone kicking over trash can. That's from Back to the Future. That's young Marty McFly in Back to the Future too,
real?
I think.
He was kicking over people's garbage cans?
Yes, I think so. Because Marty's kid is such an obnoxious little jackass. He's just walking around kicking shit and being annoying. I bet that's what it was.
Oh, interesting.
And with as much Back to the Future they threw in this movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is actually really well thought out. See? Again, forethought. There's so much forethought in this movie. It's crazy. It's really, really crazy how much forethought there is in this. So, did you catch that they almost made Sasha Calais' Supergirl basically inconsequential to the story?
Felt like it.
They almost did. So, during the repowering scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the machine hadn't shut down, she basically would have been completely inconsequential to the story because the events of the story would have played out as they played out and nothing would have changed.
Mm-hmm.
So literally that would have been, that they would have made her inconsequential. And then there's another almost huge fuck up in the movie. If they hadn't made the footage of Barry's dad in the convenience store blurry, if they hadn't made it blurry, then, or like sort of like unwatchable, then the story, if the story had ended up at the courthouse, that would have made no sense.
Yeah.
At the trial, because he wouldn't have been in jail. Mm-hmm. Because nobody would have been in jail. So yeah. So I thought that was interesting too. Like again, forethought. Like I think a lot of forethought went into this because that's something that anybody can make a very easy oversight of. So as far as the action sequences beyond the opener, because that was a pretty big one, what did you think about? Well, you said you liked the Michael Keaton CGI action sequences. What did you think about the introduction to Supergirl?
I thought she looked great. I didn't have any problem with anything she did. Like that, actually, I thought, I mean, it still looked CGI when they were fighting the Soviet soldiers. Yeah. But it looked good enough that it didn't bother me, if that makes any sense. Like, it was like a daytime scene, so you expect it to look a little wonky.
Rubbery.
A little rubbery, yeah. That's a good
Yeah.
But also, like, that's another issue with, like, the three administrations at work, because both Marvel and Warner Brothers, and they're the two primary ones, they overwork the VFX houses so much.
Yes.
It's basically like a sweatshop in the VFX houses, because it's only a small amount of VFX houses, really. Yeah. And then when they keep changing their minds, they don't have time to make... They've got them hit a release date. They don't have time to keep screwing with it. And yeah, that's what you get. Like, it's not... a lot of people think like, oh, DC can't get their CGI straight. Well, look at Love and Thunder.
Yep.
Look at, look at Quantumania. And, I recently had someone who said, responded to me saying those things by saying, well, Guardians Volume 3 looked great or whatever.
Because it had years to be made.
Well, one, it had years to be made. Two, Marvel gave Gunn carte blanche to do whatever he wanted.
Oh, so he went and hired his own SFX people?
I mean, well, I don't know about that, but I do know that Gunn had years to plan. He storyboards everything meticulously. He relies as much as he can on practical effects. And when you don't have a studio changing your film every couple of months, you have time to shoot the sequences, the VFX sequences first, and have them working on it for as long as they can to make it look as good as it can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you need as much time as possible, for sure. I totally agree with that.
It's absolutely documented how much Love and Thunder was changed in post.
Yeah.
So many of these movies are just shot on a green screen and they just change whatever the hell they want in post, like over and over and over, and it's going to look shitty.
Yeah. Yeah, that movie was dog plot. I'm not a big fan of that film. I didn't like how they sexually assaulted Thor. I thought that was really fucked up, especially in a kids movie, in a Disney movie. That was really effed up. And they screwed up the best story of all time. Like the best comic book story of all time. Like that story is so fucking good, and they completely fucked it up. And also the weird relationship with the hammers and like Thor, that was just really, really odd. Anyways, that's not what this review is about. Let's get back onto the Flash. I always do that. I always digress and go on tangents. So my listeners are used to that.
Hey, on my show, we call it Chasing Squirrels.
Chasing squirrels. Okay, I may need to steal that. I do have a lot of squirrels in my backyard, so I can probably justify that. So that works for me. We
actually have a Patreon show called Chasing Squirrels, where it's just like things that we just could not leave in our show because, good Lord.
Nice. That's actually a good idea.
30, 45 minutes of just horse shit.
Nice. So, the scene where Barry and young Barry get hit by lightning, gotta ask you about that. How did old Barry survive? Because he had his powers taken away, and he got hit by lightning, and he had a giant hole in his chest. But then afterwards, he didn't have a giant hole in his chest.
It's a comic book movie.
Yeah, I know. But again, it's one of those things. Saying it's a comic book movie is fine, but at the same time, there's got to be a law of logic within the universe of the comic book movie that you're creating.
Well, I don't know how deep that hole was, but people have gotten hit by lightning and survived.
Yeah, I know, but they both every time they got hit by lightning, they had a hole in their chest. That's the other thing I thought was weird. Why would you go so far as to give them holes in their chest? I was like, that doesn't really track. But unless there was something grounding the lightning behind them, that makes sense, right? Like if you have a lightning rod behind them, that makes sense. But why not just have them get struck by lightning and not have holes in their chest and have to explain why they have holes in their chest? That was just, I don't know, weird. Anyways.
Well, if you go by certain canons, like the lightning was Barry himself.
Yes, he is. And I love that. That's one of my favorite origin stories of all fucking time. I think that's the coolest shit ever. Like he's just a living paradox. Like his whole existence is paradoxical. It's just insane. It's so cool. I love it. So dope. Okay, so let's get on to the final action sequence. What did you think of that? Like, were you did you love it? Did you like anything about that at all?
Refresh my memory. What was the final action sequence?
The desert.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, God, what was it? Is he talking about the Chrono Bowl? Because I thought we talked about that. That kind of was the final action sequence. Seeing all those worlds colliding and then dark Flash coming in.
I didn't really equate that as an action sequence.
Okay.
It definitely is an action sequence, but if I'm saying final action sequence, it's got to be the big action set piece in the desert with all the speedster powers and Supergirl fighting Zod and the whole nine. Yeah. So what were your thoughts on that?
I thought it was overall enjoyable. Like there were moments where it was very, very clear that Michael Shannon was not there. Sometimes it was, very clear that it was CGI. It looked rubbery, as you put it.
Right.
Which I enjoyed your interpretation of that. I hadn't thought about it as rubber, I don't think. But then again, like, I also love seeing, the multiple sacrifices of Affleck, of Keaton. And by the way, I loved, like, one of my favorite things about the movie is the Reed dogs, as Keaton is dying, and he's like, you're going to be okay. He goes, not this time, kid, maybe some other time. And he says the exact same line that Affleck said to Barry at the beginning when he was like, you want to get dinner or something? He's like, not this time, kid, maybe next time, maybe some other time. I love that they did that. And also, like, dude, I teared up for real. Like, when he's like, I can bring you back. And he's like, you already did.
Yeah, that was great. That was a great part. I liked that part a lot.
So good. And I liked seeing, him just like throwing those bombs all over that giant Kryptonian. Like,
yeah, that was cool.
All of that was dope. Like, all of that was really cool.
Yeah. What's that one's name? Talak M or M Talak?
I don't remember ever.
Namek Al or something like that. That's his name. Yeah, I like that action sequence. I thought that the use of Speed Force powers was the most interesting thing to me. Like the mini cyclones that were created, the way that they were working together. I thought that was dope. I had a lot of fun with it. I did like the retakes, definitely. Like, as far as them going back trying to fix it. Batman's planes, ejector thing gets stuck and all that and all that. So yeah. So one of the most interesting things about this movie that I picked up that I don't think a lot of people have, I wanted to discuss with you, is did you pick up on the detail in the Dark Flash character and sort of what that all represented?
It looked like Kryptonian technology that he was getting lodged into his body over and over again from all these hundreds and thousands of years of going back and trying to change this.
Yes, good. You caught that part. There's another part to it, though. The sand that's been either in the Chrono Bowl or in that desert that he's been going back into has solidified and crystallized around him because of his discharge, right? And that's literally his entire costume was just crystallized sand, because when he gets hit, it crumbles around his face and you can see who he finally is. And again, to me, like, this movie, if there was an award for forethought in creating a movie, this movie should get it. To me, that's just so thoughtful, and it just shows that people were really thinking about, like, what's the most interesting thing that we can do with this. And granted, they had 14 minds on this movie, including, probably like 7 producers and directors and everything. But it's really interesting, the level of detail that this movie has. And I think that's the one thing I love most about it, is that somebody really, really put themselves into it. And, I felt like the end product was a real deliver for sure.
So if you're at an award show and you're getting an award for forethought, but you failed on execution, does the person coming out with the award just sort of just not ever make it to you? They just like come out and just like wander away?
That would be par for the course, wouldn't it? That definitely would be sort of on brand for a forethought award.
Can I bring up? I meant to bring this up. And
yeah, man.
I loved a lot of the parallels between like Man of Steel and this movie. Like, I loved that Keaton's initial sacrifice when the ejector seat wouldn't go and he just plowed into that Kryptonian ship. Yeah, was like Emil Hamilton's sacrifice in Man of Steel. Yeah, I thought that was really great, and I loved the old the flashback to like Barry and what he was doing during Man of Steel.
Yes, I like that too. We didn't talk about that. I enjoyed that too. I thought that was important, because those are questions I definitely had, because when you get to see the the BVS metahuman files, these people all exist. They're all out there. Yeah. And Zod's out in the world. Zod comes to Earth and broadcasts to the world that he's here. Like, why didn't anybody do anything? But it finally said that Barry did try to do something. I think that's awesome.
And I like that we did get that shot of the kid and his dad. Yeah. In the current timeline, who didn't have anyone there to save them. Right. I like the overall idea in this movie. I like what they were going for with this idea that you can't save everyone, you can't do everything. And that's one of the great things. That's one of the things I really liked about the baby scene, for all of its shortcomings.
Right.
Is that, he was very, like, he's the fastest man alive. He's literally, like, trying to plot trajectories, like trying to figure out how to save everyone all at the same time.
Yes.
And then on a grander scale, what he keeps trying to do by going back in time.
See, that's the great thing about the great thing about the baby shower scene for me, was the thought, again, forethought, but the thought that went into making that as inventive as possible. The scalpels that were like going towards the baby, and Barry has to use that as, a acetylene tank to knock the scalpels out of the way. He uses the bedpan to knock away the acid. He puts the other baby in the microwave, and even further in the story, when older Barry is talking to younger Barry about having to move people around, he's like, you can't just move people around. You have to use something like a microwave. Like, he literally refers back to the microwave. So I thought that was really charming and really funny.
By the way, do you listen to Fat Man Beyond, or whatever it's called now, with Kevin Smith?
I used to, but Kevin sort of just became too much of a cheerleader for me. Like, everything was great, and there was never any really harsh criticism. Not harsh criticism, but honest criticism.
Well, for that, you've got Mark Bernardin.
Mark's good, but Mark is sometimes too critical. So yeah.
Well, that's why they play well together. And I don't listen to him a lot, but I did listen to their Flash review, and of course Kevin loved it, and Mark had a lot of issues. But there was someone in the audience said something about how the babies didn't look real, and
they didn't look real. Yeah.
No, they didn't. And Kevin's response was like, "You want to see real baby? I'm glad they didn't look real. You want to see real babies put in mortal danger? You fucking weirdo."
It's a good point.
Dude, I howled, man. That cracked me up.
Yeah, that is a good point, though. You don't want to see babies be put in mortal danger. That's for sure. But yeah, again, the whole forethought, the inventiveness of that, like for me now, because we've seen so many action sequences in so many comic book movies, I will be honest with you, dude, I measure comic book action sequences based on use of space, inventiveness, and creativity with the power sets. That's literally how I measure them now. Because to me, that's really all that's left. Like, you just gotta kind of throw balls to the wall and try and do something nuts, And I get really excited when I see somebody do that, like, for instance, like the Guardians hallway scene. Again, we're on another tangent. The Guardians hallway scene to me was pretty creative. It was pretty creative in the use of all the characters together, how they sort of co-opted, like in co-op mode. I definitely feel like James Gunn was playing a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy, like the PS3 or PS5 game or PS4 game. And he was like, oh, that looks cool. Oh, I can do that together with this person. Oh, okay, let's do that. Like, I definitely felt like a lot of that was in that. But yeah. And again, to me, the movie's just thoughtful, and it really thought about who the character was, what the character can do. And I think that's one of the things that I really missed out on The Flash with Grant Gustin, because of the limited CGI budgets that they have, or the limited production budgets that they have. And that show just fell off a cliff in like season 4, but what can you do? So we talked about Dark Flash and how, like, kind of messed up he was, and you did hit the nail on the head. That is Kryptonian technology and shrapnel that he's picked up over time. But I really love the inventiveness of that sort of crystallized sand around him as almost like his skin. Like, that was just crazy to me. I was like, wow, that's just so fucking cool that they thought about doing that, for sure. So the last thing I want to talk about is the Chrono Bowl, because one of the things that Andy Muschietti has said in the wake of the criticism of the movie was that it was all stylistic choices. And I have a thought on that. So the Chrono Bowl, when you see Flash in the Chrono Bowl and using it to shift time, the sand gets kicked up and the sand moves into sort of the Coliseum around the bowl, and it starts to become these figures. So maybe the interface, like almost like the visual interface or the visual representation of the points in time, maybe it was just made up of the material of the Chrono Bowl, and that's why it looks so kind of off-putting. Plus, like, if you just consider the scope and scale of the scenes that they had to create within the Chrono Bowl, it probably was just way too cost prohibitive to try and do it any other way than the way that they did it. Like, did you give any thought to that? Well, what were your thoughts on Machete's comments in the wake of the criticism of the CGI?
Well, I mean, I like your take on it, and I hadn't really thought about it that way. Like my take on it was, they didn't have the time or money to make the cameos they had look good, so they made it look like that intentionally with Nick Cage, because they literally had him in a suit. They brought in the guy who designed Nick Cage's suit.
The Superman suit?
Yeah, from Superman Lives that never got made. They literally had him come in and make a friggin' suit for Nick Cage, who was there physically, but they still made him look like a cartoon. But I think they just realized everything else is going to look like a cartoon except for Nick Cage.
Right.
So I think it was a little bit of both. I think they realized we're not going to have time to get all this done.
Yeah, because it's a lot, dude. Like, when you sit there and you look at the pure volume of the scenes that they had to put into those sequences, that's nuts to me. Like you know, it's crazy that they even achieved it. Yeah, I think maybe several things can be true in this instance, you know. Maybe it was a stylistic choice, but maybe the stylistic choice was informed by the budget. Maybe the budget was informed by the timeline. Maybe the timeline was informed by the level or the amount of available workforce that they had, right? To complete the shots, because it's a lot of fucking shots, dude. It's a lot of shots. And, you know, I was disappointed with how sort of singularly everybody came down on the movie about that. Like, nobody was even like thinking about like the scope of the work, especially in the wake of like what you brought up earlier. You know, the wake of the complaints that came down from the special effects houses and the people working in special effects. Like, that's something we definitely should have taken into consideration before people started shitting on this film, for sure. But
well, yeah, but you know, people love to they love to take sides, and they love to be like, well, DC can't do this, or Marvel can't. Marvel, you know, the argument right now is Phase 4 is shit, and Marvel hasn't had good CGI. Well, there are several reasons for that, and the VFX houses don't like belong to either studio. It's just that they're saying, hey, here we've got 2,000 shots, and they don't tell them anything about the shots, and bids are placed, and then all of a sudden, well, we're changing this, and we're changing this, and you have to do this, and like, these are people who are, you know, spending their entire lives they're having family problems, for Christ's sake, because they can't see their kids and shit because they're too busy rendering a scene from The Flash. Like, and I think a lot of that is the studios and the directors. They have to plan better. They have to be more intentional. They have to give time or push your shit back. Like, I'm sorry theater vendors. But I'm in the camp of letting the artist cook. And for me, like, when the VFX people are forced to basically be in a sweatshop and get paid very little to beat their brains out over this stuff, and they can't realistically get it done in the time that the studio wants it, it's gonna look like that. It doesn't matter if you're Marvel or DC or what.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. We're on the same page about that, for sure. That you know. So my take on Phase 4 is very simple. They basically compressed the timeline. They increased the volume exponentially as far as the end products go, and they did it without building a larger workforce. And that is just basically math. Like, that is you know, the math of production. You can't constrict your timeline and expect great results, or, you know, the same level of quality control without adding more people to provide that quality control or provide the production resources that you need. You know, that's one part of it. You know, I think that the decline of Marvel has got it's on several tiers. Honestly, I feel like Phase 4 was and I'm speaking as a marketing person of almost 15 years. That was a test marketing campaign. That's what it was. That's why it wasn't connected to anything. Like, none of the stories were connected to each other. That's why everybody had a sidekick. That's why everybody was sort of sidelined by their sidekick. Like, the stories were sort of overshadowed by their sidekick, as they were doing a test marketing campaign. They wanted to see how people would relate to the new characters. That's what it was. That like there was no goal, there was no overarching story that they were trying to tell with Phase 4. They were testing the waters. And
which is ironically what Warner Brothers has been doing the last several movies, just like, well, Shazam did all right, do another one. Well, we got The Rock over here, and they gave him way too much power.
Yeah. They gave him way too much power. Yeah.
Like, don't let The Rock tell you he's not going to be in Shazam.
Yeah.
Fuck The Rock.
I agree.
Oh my God, it's just.
I agree. And what and well, this is alleged, but what allegedly was done by Henry Cavill's agent to Henry Cavill, like basically telling him like, you come back for Black Adam, we get you in this final scene, you're Superman again. And what does he do? He goes on Instagram, makes a video, announces he's Superman, and then James Gunn doesn't hire him to be Superman.
That wasn't his agent necessarily. That was DeLuca and Abdi, who were in charge of the DC side of things, or Warner Studios at the time.
Right, but wasn't Garcia involved in the process too, though?
Well, yeah, because she was his agent, but yeah, no. But DeLuca and Abdi were all on board. They wanted Cavill back. Hamada, who came before them, did not want Cavill back.
Yeah, I know that part about Hamada.
DeLuca and Abdi really wanted him back, and DC like tweeted the same shit out that he was like DC, Warner Brothers, everybody across the board tweeted that shit.
Yeah.
But it was, then like a month later, Gunn was announced, and Gunn just didn't hire him.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that part's true. Like he just didn't hire him. That's basically it. And there's so many people that are like, oh, James Gunn fired. No, James Gunn didn't fire Henry Cavill. James Gunn just didn't hire Henry Cavill. That's the problem.
James Gunn has also got to consider things like the fact that Henry Cavill is 40 years old.
Yeah.
All right. And yeah, you're like, well, that's not bad. Well, no, but he just hired a guy who's 29. Yeah. And you might say, well, he's too young. Well, he's exactly the same age Henry Cavill was when Snyder cast him. Yeah.
And there's a factor of time that has passed since Man of Steel, since BVS, and he didn't do any new shots for Justice League, according to everybody. So but yeah, cool, man. So did you, when you reviewed this film, I guess you reviewed this film for your podcast, did you have a rating system? What'd you give it?
Yeah, we don't do rating systems.
Were you recommending your listeners to go see it?
No. We don't normally do that either.
Okay.
And I had a first thought spoiler-free review with a friend of mine who's not my normal co-host on the show.
Right.
And she disagreed with me. Like, she had many of the same problems I did.
Right.
And but I said, I don't think it's worth seeing in the theater.
Huh.
Like, if it wasn't because of the effects.
Right.
And because of just like, honestly, because of how bad it looks on the big screen, like, I was just like, you know what? It's not, don't take the whole family out and waste your money doing this. You're going to be disappointed. I kind of feel bad about that, but I don't know. Like, I do think it's worth watching though. So, if you just really got to go see it in the theater, go do it.
Yeah.
But it's also definitely worth watching. It's an interesting flick. It's got so much so much potential that I just felt like kind of didn't really make it.
Right. Well, one of the things that we need to talk about, because I want to get a general sense of one aspect of this film from you as far as what you thought about it. Because you talked about the stuff that annoyed you, and a lot of it was more visual stuff, more of it was character stuff, performance stuff. But the script alone, were you a fan of the script? Like, did you think it was a well-written movie? Or
yes and
okay,
yes
go ahead.
And no.
Okay.
Parts of it, like I said, I always hate the superhero loses his powers and has to get them back. I always hate that.
Yeah.
I don't know, because it's very hard to just think of. I don't know what was actually in the script. As presented, it leaves some threads that I wish they had followed up on.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we saw Patty and Albert, how they were in the primary timeline. Then we saw them in the Redux timeline where they're like stoner friends of Barry's or whatever.
Yep.
I don't remember seeing them again. Maybe at the end, and they're dicks again. But like, what I felt like there was like a real there was a vacuum around setting up Barry's actual current life.
Right.
And they had the pieces there. Mm-hmm. They had his boss say like, you've been working here for however long. You shouldn't still be getting me coffee. Now get me coffee.
Yeah.
You had all these little things that gave us the rough sketch, but it didn't feel like Barry had any kind of life to be concerned with giving up. And maybe that was the point, that he's
giving up in what sense? Giving up in what sense?
Like, you think, you've got friends, you've got your current friendships and your relationships and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
He's just got a date with Iris, but in his present, initially, Patty and Albert are not actually his friends. They're jerks to him.
Right.
He just met up with Iris again, even though she remembered him from college and maybe seeing him from ZSJL.
Right.
So maybe that was kind of the point. It was like Barry has put so much of his life into exonerating his dad. He has never really made friends or had a life, so he didn't really consider that there was anything to preserve. So going back in time had to have been an okay idea. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
So maybe that was just by design.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out like.
Oh, so okay. So you're saying there wasn't much to sacrifice, like in juxtaposition with saving his mom, there wasn't anything really to bump up against the value of saving his mom. Like he's not really giving up that much by going back. Okay. I get what you're saying.
His dad's in jail and all he does is try to figure out how to get his dad out of jail help Bruce. Like,
yeah.
So, and who would think that by going back in time, you would change things in the past and create a new universe where no one was the same at all.
Yeah.
Like you can't, I mean, I guess Bruce could, Keaton's Bruce could figure it out and be like, oh no, it reverberates from into the past as well. But, from just almost a layman's perspective, you would think, okay, I go back in time, move the tomatoes, all is well.
Mm-hmm. Right. No, I get what you're saying for sure. Like the balance sheet in terms of Barry's life was, there just wasn't a lot to sacrifice. Like it was almost it was almost like a no-brainer. Like, oh, I get to save my mom? Okay. Well, nothing's really going to, like I've really got nothing to lose kind of deal. I get that. That makes sense to me. But I guess, these are all through lines though, don't you think? From the way that he was set up and, in Justice League, both Justice Leagues, like he's just a socially awkward dude and he keeps to himself and he doesn't got a lot going on. I definitely felt he was like more lighthearted in ZSJL though, if I'm being honest, than he was in this one. But yeah.
Really?
Yeah. A little bit more lighthearted. Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah. A touch, but yeah.
Now, like one of the things I like though, is that like present day Barry is to present day Bruce as younger Barry is to present day Barry.
Yeah.
Because Barry's like, I'm going to do this. And Bruce is like, don't do that. That's stupid shit. You don't know what you're doing. He's like, screw you, old man.
True.
And he goes back and does it. And then the whole movie, he spends basically playing Bruce to his younger self. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Like I said, there was a lot I really liked and loved about the movie. And then it does bother me that, even after he's seen everything and he learns the lesson, you can't go back and fix things. You have to let go. Which, by the way, I said this in my review over on DC on Screen, on our spoiler review with my actual co-host. I was like, I think the point of the whole movie being, sometimes you just have to learn to let go. I think it was like from every administration that was the message to the Snyder fans.
That's true. That's true. That was the message. You know, not every solution has. Yeah, not every problem has a solution, and sometimes you have to let go. 100%. So yeah, was this a thesis to Snyder fans? Possibly. The other thing I would say about this movie in relation to the Snyderverse is that it is the definitive note on record that Henry Cavill's Superman is the only one that could have beat Zod. Like, it basically solidifies that. Like, it's basically a testament to the fact that there's no other event, like there's no other way for these events to go that would have ended up with the world being saved other than, like, in the context of DC, like, there's no other way the world would have been saved without Henry Cavill as Superman, Kal-El, you know, Superman to fight Zod, to stop Zod. Like, that's the only way it would have happened. So I thought that was a real sort of, like, if anything, it was almost like a real nice signal to the Snyderverse, but I think they missed it, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of Snyderverse fans have sort of missed that because it is sort of like a tribute. Yeah, exactly. That's another thing that I pointed out to Snyder fans that were shitting on this movie. I was like, yo, they basically conclude that it was like the only way the world would have been saved was Kal-El. So, you know, you guys might want to go check this flick out. That would probably be a smart idea. So the final sort of reveals are very interesting in this movie. But the one that I liked the most was when his tooth fell out again, but it was from the wrong side. Like, because, you know, I don't know if you picked up on that. But,
I didn't, actually.
Okay, but before we get into that, what do you think about the overall theme of the film, which is like, you can't fix every problem. Like, you've got to let go. There's a finality to this movie. You know, when they started trying to bring back Kara, when they started trying to bring back Kara and Bruce, I was like, oh God, it's gonna be another one of these painted over happy endings. This is gonna be dog plot. And then when they let them die and they let the Earth die, I was like, holy shit, okay. So this is what's happening. This is interesting. Yeah. Were you a fan of that, or were you hoping for a happier ending?
No, I was fine with them dying.
Okay.
I was fine with them. I think overall the message.
Yeah, me too.
That, you know, some problems don't have solutions. You have to learn to let go. Right. I was absolutely fine with that. Right. What I didn't like was, and I started to say this earlier, I think I got sidetracked. Sorry. No, it's probably my fault. Okay. I'm super ADHD, dude. Like, I'm all over the place. But no, I think what I was trying to say earlier, though, was that, you know, Barry goes back, he learns you can't do that, and then he goes back and he's like, I'm just going to put it on the top shelf. Right, but there's consequences for it. I love that. I love that, yes. Yeah, but it's like, dude, stop messing with the timeline. Right. Like, you just learned this vital lesson, then you watch your younger self do it over and over and over and over. You can't do it. And then he's like, I'm going to do it this way anyway. I'm going to just try. And why? See, that's the thing. And I've heard people talk about that. Like, they almost basically, you know, they took the lesson that Barry learns and they basically, you know, spit in its face and tried to do it another way. But I think what was happening is Barry was sort of saying to himself, oh, this little thing won't matter. Right? Like, moving the cans to the top shelf, that's not going to matter. Right? And I think what Machete was saying was, yeah, it does matter, and here are the consequences for it. It may not be as big as no metahumans being in the world, you know, in the new thread of the world you've created, or the new timeline you created, but there are going to be consequences. And I think that's just what they were going for, was they were like, you know, they were sort of cementing the idea that no matter how much, like, no matter how minute the change is that anybody would want to make to space and time, that there's always going to be some level of consequence for it. I think that's what they were going for. I didn't necessarily see it as like spitting in the face of the thesis of the movie. I know a lot of people saw it that way, but I didn't quite see it that way. I guess it's more frustration that that Barry just will not learn his lesson.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
Like, I would actually be excited if Clooney continued.
I would not. I would definitely not. Like, if you think I have problems with the physicality of Keaton, like Keaton Koenig, no way. Can't do it.
I like, as far as acting is concerned,
right?
Yeah, he was dog shit in Batman and Robin, but I don't blame him at all.
No, I blame
Batman
the script. I blame
awful.
the producers. I blame anybody that was working on that movie other than him. 100%.
Well, Warner Brothers literally said we want a cartoon.
Oh, there you go.
We want, like, they had all the designs for the toys and everything before they ever even had a script.
Right.
Like, it was like Schumacher was pissed about that. Like, he was literally walking around going, "Remember, we're making a cartoon." Like, he was not happy. So
he was saying that to people.
Yeah, like,
that's fucking funny.
The apparently the attitude on that set was, we're under contract. Let's just make this shitty toy commercial and be done with it.
Studios. What can you do? That's funny.
So, but I was a big fan of ER back in the day. When he was announced as Batman, I was really excited because he had some really, really great character arcs. He had some really great stuff where he would just be brooding on the roof in the snow, and I'm like, dude, that is so Batman. Like, I was so. And he is such a good actor.
Right.
I've seen him do so many things, and I'm like, God, if they had utilized that in Batman. And for what it's worth, he did a fantastic job in that movie, in Batman and Robin, in the parts where Alfred is sick and he's dealing with that.
Huh.
Like, his chemistry with Michael Goff as Alfred is dying, that was heartbreaking. Like, he did such a good job with those portions of the movie.
That's true. Yeah, he did.
So,
he did do a good part there for sure.
I cannot, I'm not going to sit around and go like, Clooney ruined Batman. No, Clooney never got a fair shot at Batman.
Yeah, no, that's cool, dude. So, what was that thing? So, when Clooney showed up, I was not for it. I thought it was weird, but I knew
it was weird.
Yeah, but I knew why they were doing it, so that's fine.
There was a cut of it where it was Keaton
getting out of because they were, because there was almost a port, like, weren't they almost going to take Keaton out of the movie? Like, wasn't that sort of on the slate at one point?
I don't believe so. No,
okay.
They didn't have a backup for if Keaton said no.
Okay, that makes sense.
Basically, but no, there is a version of that they shot where the Justice League show up in their civvies to Barry's dad's trial,
right? And
that includes Henry Cavill.
Oh, okay.
Henry Cavill was there, and he was there with Cara Zor-El, and Gal Gadot was there. And then Bruce pulls up and Keaton gets out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
There, you can find the shots. There's shots of it, behind the scenes stuff.
I'll have to check it out. Did you clock the wrong tooth? Did you clock that?
I did not. I did not notice it was the wrong tooth.
Yeah, I love that part. I was like, again, just attention to detail. Like, I'm a big fan of attention to detail and thoughtfulness. Like, but like, as far as the script goes, like you were saying, I felt that the script was the best part of this movie. If anything, this is a reader's movie. Like, to me, this is a writer's movie to me, because it's just so well done. It's so well thought out, and you can tell that there's so many different people that put their input into this movie. But yeah. Anyways, guys, thank you for joining us for our review and our discussion about The Flash. We hope you enjoyed it. Dave, why don't you tell people where they can find your content and where they can listen to DC On Screen?
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I had fun.
Yeah, me too, brother. That was a good chat.
You can find my show, DC On Screen, at dconscreen.com. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We're everywhere. The podcatchers, every podcatcher that you need, we're there. We've been talking about the DC Comics multiverse on film and television for 8 years now, since 2015. And we don't believe that, we don't die on hills. We change our minds, we change our hearts about shit. We're all changing human beings, evolving people. So
that's good.
Yeah, that's what we do. And
That's good.
We're also not safe for work, and we have a lot of dick jokes.
Nice.
I won't lie.
Nice.
So,
well, I think my listeners will really appreciate your content because that's basically we're the same way. We change our minds, we change our hearts, we don't die on hills. We're not really hard and fast about anything. Except that Thor: Love and Thunder was a piece of dog shit. That's probably the only one that I would die on, the only hill.
for my issues with it, I actually did enjoy that movie for the most part.
Well,
but you know what? I'll die on the hill that Wonder Woman 1984 was a piece of shit.
Oh, it was awful, dude. Don't even get me fucking started. You mean you should do another episode where we just tear apart Wonder Woman 1984. I'm okay with that because once they fully fueled once they took a plane out of a museum fully fueled and flight ready, I was like, I'm sorry, I cannot take this movie seriously anymore. That was just too much for me to accept. Because that does not make any fucking sense. Like, the Smithsonian's not going to keep a fully fueled, flight-ready plane in the museum just for safety's sake. Like, what if it fucking explodes? It kill a bunch of people. Morons.
I mean, my primary issue with 84 was the fact that Wonder Woman and the ghost of...
Oh, yeah, that was fucked up.
The ghost of Steve was basically just raping a guy.
Yep, I'm with you on that.
I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Wonder Woman would not condone that. That's definitely not something Wonder Woman would canonically condone. She would not be okay with that.
And then it all ends with a hope speech. I hate hope speeches. Like, like that's not going to change the entire world. I'm sorry.
No, it's not going to change the entire world for sure. There were some great performances in it. There were some cool visuals, but that's literally about it. That movie was bad. Really, 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 really bad.
It was bad.
Anyways, folks, we will have Dave back for sure. I think Dave's going to be our no go-to on any DC stuff because it sounds like he's got his finger on the pulse of everything going on in DC. And I don't have the time.
Or his finger up the ass.
There you go. Or his finger up the ass. Because I don't have the time to jump into probably all the Reddits that Dave is on and getting all the information that he's getting because just don't have the time. It's just not something I can physically do. So, but Dave, again, thank you so much for being here, man. It was a great chat. I'd love to come on your show sometime.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I think our listeners are going to love your stuff just as much as they love ours because it sounds like we have a lot in common, a similar tone, a similar approach, a similar mindset. I'm glad to see that there's more shows that have such an open mind or the same open mind that we do, because there's just not a lot of them anymore, and it's good to meet like-minded folks. So, anyways, to be continued. I'm Frank McGuire. Peace out. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Stitcher, or Spotify. And as much as we appreciate the reviews, the best way to support the show is to tell your friends and family about Meanwhile Back on the Podcast. #spread the nerd. To stay up to date on all things Meanwhile, head over to solo.to/meanwhilepod. There you can sign up for our newsletter, follow us on all your favorite social media platforms, and find the newest and latest episodes, contests, and giveaways.